The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. This is the United Podcast Network.
Hi, my name is Joseph Bemister. I am your host. This is the Young American Podcast. Today, Riley is not with us, but Ben is with us today. And we'll be talking about Trump saying that he wants to delay the election or calling for it, and then cancel culture. So, like, if you said one wrong quote comment, it could be in any context. People are just going to blindly attack you, and they're going to try to get a supporting behind you of them blindly attacking you. So, was it 2 weeks ago Trump said he wanted to delay the election? Or
yeah, it was just about 2 weeks ago. Trump was talking about delaying the election, and then that was when the furor started.
Yeah, everyone. You just don't say that. I mean, this kind of ties into cancel culture because of what he said. And now there are a lot of Republicans just turning against him, and especially his supporters, a big drop in his supporters. But then you see someone like the diehard Trump supporters trying to justify it. And when you have conversations with them, it always lies to, well, he's trying to stop the mail-in ballots. Well, that shouldn't be a thing in the first place. Like, everyone should have to go do a ballot. And I understand with Corona, everything going on, but if you don't want to get sick, just don't go.
Well, I think a lot of the confusion comes in that people think absentee ballots are the same thing as mail-in ballots, and they're not.
Yeah.
They're absolutely not. Absentee ballots are designed for people that absolutely, unequivocally cannot make it to a polling center or where they're registered to vote. It's for military members. It's for college students. You know, it's not just for anyone to blindly just mail in their ballot. You live in New Hampshire. I live in Massachusetts. I got mine. I got 2 mail-in ballots sent to my house, me and my wife. And I immediately looked at it. It looked like an ad for a local car wash, essentially. And I just said, nope.
Yeah.
My ballot place is only a couple miles away from my house. I can easily get there, not a problem. And then people kept claiming, you know, the Trumps have been doing mail-in ballots for years. No, they've been doing absentee ballots for years. There is a difference there. But I thought it was really stupid of him to say that.
Yeah, it was.
Because that's one of those situations. He doesn't have the power to do that. That's a Congress situation. And
yeah.
If you delayed it past, I think, January 21st, guess who the president automatically is at that point? Nancy Pelosi. Is that what any of you want?
No.
I think most Democrats don't want that either.
They want themselves to be there. They're so focused about wanting themselves there, especially on both sides. I don't think it's just Democrat, Republican. I think most people are looking at it that someone's going to win the race.
Yeah.
And by Trump delaying it, it's just a way for him to figure out how to do his next, in quote, sham, because the whole like Russia probe they accused him of and all that fun stuff.
I think that's a whole other can of worms we're not going to talk about right now.
Yeah.
But I think honestly what he ultimately wants to do is push it back a little bit further to allow more time for an economic recovery so that he has a platform to stand on, say, hey, it was the greatest economy in the world. Yeah, we got nailed by coronavirus, but now we've rebuilt the greatest economy in the world. I think that's what he wants, is to push it back a little bit to allow him more time to kind of step out of the mess that we're currently in, whether it's his fault or someone else's fault. I don't know. I don't care. I really think that's what he wants.
Well, that's the only really like thing that, in my eyes, he's good for is the economy.
But
what he does, and I don't really understand it as a whole and exactly how he does it, but it's just continuously growing. And I know he's bringing everything back and tariffs and reform like that, but I don't understand like how would a tariff work in certain instances.
Well, I think the economy gets lumped into a couple of different things, and I think most people don't really understand. And I'm not saying I understand. I have the answers, but I think when you're looking at the economy, a fallacy a lot of people make is look at the stock market and say, that's a true indication of how the economy's work. But that's not.
It's not.
That is not an indication of how your average American has any money or is earning money. That's a very small subset that are actually utilizing that tool. So for them, it looks great. But unless the companies take their windfall and actually reward their low-level employees or mid-level employees, you know, it's not a real sign of how the economy's working.
No.
Just how much money CEOs or businesses are actually pulling in is not really a good indicator of how the economy's actually working. It's about every American's spending power. That's really should be the indicator of what we look at.
And at the moment, our gold's at an all-time high, and that's because the dollar's at an all-time low, and
Yeah.
people don't understand that. It's like, oh my god, like gold's so much, like so expensive compared to like last week or 2 weeks ago when I was gonna get my 1 gram subscription every month, and it's like, congrats, dude. Like,
Or you're going to go up to Alaska and do like ice fishing or ice dredging or whatever it is.
yeah, those guys are making a lot of money right now.
I know. I watch that show.
Yeah, it's ridiculous doing that type of stuff. I almost bought like one of those kids to try to go up north and just like do it for fun.
Yeah.
But I didn't try. I was like, no, I'm not going to waste my time.
Panning for gold in the rivers of...
yeah, in the Saco, like way up north, trying to dodge the game warden, just like, But no, yeah.
Get your inflatable tube out of my way. I'm trying to get some gold.
Exactly. The next kayak convoy that comes through. Exactly. Get out of here.
Move your paddles.
Yeah.
You've got a nugget.
Yeah, I got a nugget. You're moving up the water. It's too rough. Yeah, but people don't quite understand right now. The dollar is at an all-time high, and our spending power just completely dropped overnight.
Yeah, it's concerning. And then that's part of what happens when you apply tariffs to things that are coming in from overseas is, what's that company going to do? If they're going to have to pay more tax to bring it in, what are they inherently going to do?
They're going to raise the price.
Exactly, because they want to ensure that their bottom line is still sufficient enough.
Yep.
So bringing back, the best thing he could have done, and he did do it to a certain extent, was to bring back industry.
Yeah, he did.
Industry needed to be brought back. We needed to actually build things here, make things here. We needed Made in America to actually mean something again. And that did start to take place. If there's 4 more years, maybe more of that takes place. I don't know. Or maybe, he set it up so that it can be a domino effect that the next 2-3 presidents can continue on that field, whoever they are, can continue down that field and bringing that kind of stuff back because we desperately need it. We need those jobs.
Yeah, he also passed a really good infrastructure reform, but he didn't really do anything with it. He spent I think out of the 1.8 billion or trillion, I forget what was a B or T before the little number, but I remember seeing it was a pretty large number, and he only spent $500,000 in it.
Yeah.
And that was it. The rest of it went to the wall.
Yeah.
So it was like 600 million went to infrastructure itself, and I think that was like the Port of Louisiana. And then after that, they took 500 million. Like, oh, we're just gonna.
I've always had a fundamental issue with the wall.
Yeah, and that's because I think you and I lean a little bit more towards the libertarian side.
Yeah.
From or liberty, just not really libertarian, but like a freedom aspect of we didn't ask to come here. You don't ask to cross the imaginary line.
No.
Like when the Homo sapiens migrated from Africa to Asia, they didn't ask.
No, they just did it. They just did it. I'm a globalist at heart in the sense that these lines on maps shouldn't really matter, but I'm also a realist in knowing that we're a very long way away from that. You need basically the movie Independence Day to take place for us to get to that level, and that's just not going to happen.
No. Well, on top of that, right now with all the instability in our past. Our dark past has created a lot of enemies as a country.
Sure.
And for no particular reason. And if we start opening up a lot of these borders without at least somewhat of security, we're going to leave ourselves extremely open to just attacks. And
going back to the wall real quick, the reason I was against it was you're going to spend a lot of money to build it, and then what's going to happen? The next president or 2 presidents later is going to spend a lot of money to tear it down.
Yep.
That was the inherent flaw in the plan of building a wall. Walls are built, and then they always get taken down.
That's just
history.
Yeah.
So that made no sense to me. I would have rather have taken that money and actually paid more border patrol agents.
Yeah, or even better training. A lot of the time, when you look at the downfall in law enforcement, it's their training. It's not they don't have the right tools. They have abundance of tools. They're now falling to the Department of Defense's budget. They have a small portion of that so they can get the leftover surplus gear.
Yeah.
And they get AMRAPs and tanks and bulletproof armor and select fire rifles and stuff like that were used by the military. And they have the tools. It's just
they don't get trained to do it.
They get trained, but they don't get as in-depth training as I've seen some people. Like if you were to take your run-of-the-mill police officer straight out of the police academy, and then you were to go down to Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, about 2 miles up the road.
They get smoked.
They get smoked.
Yeah.
Smoked.
Which is why they take the Gracies
and then they have them train
police officers in hand-to-hand combat, which is very effective. And I think you listen to Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
I listen to Joe Rogan. And it's one of the things he's talked about. He's like, I've learned how to choke someone without killing them. I know how to
Exactly.
put you out without putting you down.
Yeah, like I know how to make you go unconscious, but not to the point of asphyxiation where I've killed you.
Yeah. There should be more training. Some of the things that gets a little concerning sometimes is when you see an over-militarization of the police departments with the lack of training to go in conjunction with that. It's like, cool, you got this shiny new tank. Do you really know how to use it? Do you know how to deploy it appropriately?
Have you
Are you
licensed to even
trained
drive that? Like, are you
properly?
even going to drive that down the road without hitting other cars or anything like that?
Yeah.
And I mean, I understand like a bus, it's the same thing, but just have you driven a bus even? And then like some of these cops are like, oh, let's pass defensive driving in the police academy and then hand you the keys to everything that we have.
Yeah, and then they'll go do one nominal training session every 2 years or something like that, and it's a one-day event.
Yeah.
Whereas you look at the military, they're constantly training.
Constantly training. And I think every month the police officers like firearms qualification and like they do driving qualifications and pepper spray things and tasers and such, but that's a given because you have to be good with your firearm. You have to be good with your taser and stuff like that. But like I've seen a lot of police officers, their one complaint was that the department doesn't supply a lot of their like after school training per se. So when before they go home, that police officer down the road in Salem might run to Gracie Jiu-Jitsu and go do his nightly class or two times a week class, and the department has they have nothing to do with it. They're not paying him, they're not reimbursing him, and he's like, well, I'm bettering myself as a police officer so I can be more safe on how I go and hands-on with people and know that I can get home at night and that they can get safely into a jail cell. Why aren't you reimbursing me for this? And I think a lot of the times it comes down to the captain or who's in charge. And it's that old school mindset of like, the tools and the training that we supply you are enough.
Yeah, well, we've learned they're not.
No.
And obviously we'll put out the qualifier that we always do. Most cops are good.
Most cops
are, take their training very seriously and apply it in appropriate manners when they're in the field. It's just a few bad apples along the way, but regardless, I still want those good ones trained as well as possible because their function is to protect and serve the community. And I also think that cops should probably live in or really close to the community that they're protecting and serving.
I think there are a lot of departments that have that rule that you have to live in at least the county that you're serving in.
Yeah, I hope that's the case.
Yeah, I know a good amount of police officers in my town are from surrounding towns, Salem, Pelham. Some live locally, but I don't know. I think the furthest one away was Nashua. But that was about it for the police officer who was in the town I live in. It's different now too with like how the policies are changing when it comes to good cops, bad cops.
Yeah.
When I think of a bad cop, I think of, in my eyes, not someone who's going to do violence or is like a dirty police officer taking bribes or drugs, because that doesn't really happen a lot around here.
Yeah, that's like a New York City in the 80s thing.
Exactly. Now it's like okay, he's breaking his oath. Like that's a really big thing to me. And a lot of police officers, the difference between a military guy and their oath and a police officer and their oath, it's not the same. One was told to uphold the oath no matter what, and one was told that, well, the law comes first and the Constitution comes second. And I think that's where a lot of police officers say, well, I'm really not breaking my oath, I'm doing my job.
Yeah, it gets confusing. I mean, when you get a directive from your boss, it might go into fly in the face of what we all know you should actually be doing, but your boss is telling you to do it, so now you're put in this weird predicament of...
And then it becomes political.
Exactly. I saw an interesting video this morning, sticking on the police officer route. I'm not entirely sure where this was, but there was this guy, he was causing a disturbance in a store, I think because he refused to wear a mask, and they were like, no, you're coming in our store, you're wearing a mask. And then he had a knife, and he was threatening people with the knife. He seemed like a relatively big guy, maybe 6 foot, 215 pounds or so. And a female police officer approaches the scene. She has her gun drawn because she knows that
There's a knife.
There's a knife.
Yeah.
And he's threatening her, outright loud, drunkenly doing it. And she is appropriately backing away, gun drawn, backing away, commanding him to drop the weapon. And he's using every expletive he can, and he keeps threatening her and keeps progressing towards her. She circled around the car, backing away from him 2 times.
Yeah.
2 times she was doing this. And then finally, he got to a point where he like kind of lunged close to her. He was probably about 10 feet away, but he started to lunge and get a little more agitated, more aggressive. And then she finally fired. Thank God she did, because someone was going to get hurt.
Someone was going to get hurt.
Or the people that were putting their groceries in the trunk of their car.
Yeah, and a lot of the times police officers have the 20-foot rule.
Yeah.
It's if someone has a knife, even if it be a box cutter or like a screwdriver, if they're within 20 feet of you, shoot them if they're progressing.
Yeah.
Because at that point, have you ever seen someone lunge 20 feet? If you're just standing there, have your friend lunge and run at you at 20 feet, you'd be surprised it takes like a second and a half, a second to do that.
Yeah, it's pretty quick.
Yeah, and especially if you have a back pedal. If you have the back pedal and you never turn from a target, so they're always told, like, direct your body towards target so you see and know what it's doing at all times. You're not going to turn your back and, shit, now it's gone.
Because the video you're seeing is from her body cam.
Yeah.
So
you see everything.
She is always faced directly at him.
Was there a partner? Was it like dark at night?
No, it looked like it was like 10 in the morning or something.
Okay, I saw a video the other day where it was something similar, where there was a drunk, bigger dude in Philadelphia, I think it was, and he was progressing towards 2 female police officers, and the female police officer told him, stop, stop, stop. They circled into the street, circled back around the car, and then he just started sprinting towards her, and you literally heard her say, shit, and then she just lit him up.
Yeah.
And that was justified because he obviously did the same thing. He wouldn't stop progressing, and they told him to stop. They give him 5-10 minutes to drop the knife and stop doing whatever the hell he was doing.
Yeah. And I think some people get confused about what is appropriate action from a police officer. They're looking at the I forget the guy's name, but it was in Atlanta at the Burger King, I believe it was. And, we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, and he lunges at them and all this stuff, but he gets shot in the back.
He got shot fleeing.
And everyone thought, no, that's a bad shot. You can't do that. Well, what if, because there's a neighborhood right there, what if he runs into a neighborhood and hurts someone? What then?
True. Very true. I always look at it.
You ideally wish it was a non-fatal shot, but if you talk to any police officer or even people with military training, outright military training, they're like, it's not that easy, guys.
No.
This isn't Call of Duty.
I've taken a lot of concealed carry courses and a lot of courses when it comes to like self-defense and getting in, stopping a threat. 9 times out of 10, your first round is not going to stop at that. That's why you never see somebody just shoot a target once when they're practicing. Mm-hmm. When you shoot somebody, ideally, it's always center mass. You don't want to go for the head, and that's where the kill shot is, per se. When you look at like an IDPA target, they do a like A, B, C, D zone. Mm-hmm. A zone is very center of the chest and the very center of the head. Yeah. So there's 2 A zones, as I say. Some people try to aim right outside the A zone. The head's an instant A zone, so they're going to not go for a headshot. So that's what a lot of people mean by non-lethal shot is just upper mass. Yeah.
Yeah, and people are like, why can't you just shoot him in the leg? Well, I got 2 legs that are much smaller than your torso is moving.
Well, on top of that, if I hit you in your femoral artery, game over.
Yeah, you're done anyway.
Yeah, you got like 30 seconds if I sever it before you bleed out. And I'm not trying to play that game. I'm going to shoot you into your center mass 2 to 3 times, and that's just to stop you. That's not to kill you.
Yeah.
If I wanted to kill you, I'm putting 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Yeah, you're getting shot multiple times.
You're getting shot multiple times from multiple angles.
Yeah.
Because every time you move, I'm going to shoot you again.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a scary situation out there. I mean, more guns doesn't solve the issue, but we need more responsible gun owners. And we need more responsible police.
More trained guns solve the issue.
Yeah.
But like the NF, the not fucking around coalition over that. I can't put their acronym. I just can't get in my head, but I can say it. So it's not fucking around coalition, the black militia. Did you see there's 1 accidental discharge, and then a different instance, there was 3 accidental discharges. And I think that's where it goes to show where, like, okay, trained militias that are protesting, great. They're not shooting each other.
Yeah.
Untrained militias that are protesting are now shooting each other. And there's 4 people that got injured.
Yeah. Well, you didn't see that in Lansing, Michigan.
No.
Right?
You didn't see that in Michigan.
And I thought that was a disturbing scene in itself.
Yeah.
I mean, geez, that's not a good look. And you're really... When you're doing that, you're kind of displaying the inherent threat of violence. You really are.
I think that's what they were going for, to be honest. Like, I had a good amount of friends there.
You didn't see any accidental discharges.
No,
I think they were pretty well trained with their weapon for the most part.
A lot of the guys were in the Instagram community. A lot of them, I've taken like a course with it. I haven't gone to Ridgeline, but some of them were at Ridgeline, kind of migrated over here to Pelham area, and then I shot with them, Pelham Fishing Game. They're a great group of guys. They outshoot like anyone I know any day of the week. Like you could pick like, oh, I know my buddy who's been doing this, they'll outshoot him. They're insane. They know what they're doing. They're super disciplined when it comes to it. A lot of them are ex-military, ex-police officer, current military, current police officers, and that's why they had their masks on, because of what they were doing.
Yeah.
They knew what they were doing. Their whole step into that, or whole meaning into the Michigan takeover of the State House, was that we, the people, have the power. We were given the Second Amendment. We were given the right to have a militia, and we're here to display that we're going to use that power if you want to come and take everything away from us. Actually, that was Virginia. That was the Virginia State House. We were thinking of 2 different instances.
Oh, okay.
But when they took over the Virginia State House, that was what a lot of the guys said, we're here for a reason. We're taking over the state house to let you know if you come through with these laws and you decide to come and take them from us without any due process, willingly, no BIRAC, no grandfather grace period, we're not going to allow you to do that.
Yeah.
And I think that was their threat of violence, but it was their nice way of a threat of violence. It was a big demonstration instead of just doing it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, every bit of information we get disseminated to us is so muddied and confusing. You hear one side, you hear another side, and you're like, how do I make up my mind? Because you've both got compelling images or, what you're saying to me. So how do I even make up my mind anymore?
Yeah.
When I'm bombarded with too much information.
I thought you were talking about the instance in Virginia where they took over the state house, where the militiamen, there was like 300,
I thought that was
people.
Lansing, Michigan, but
yeah,
again, so much information. It just
so
gets
we
all
were talking
confused.
about like the same thing, but
I think it was the same thing, two different places.
yeah. Oh, so they took over the Michigan State House too?
Well, that was a couple months ago. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're probably around the same time, probably a couple
Okay.
weeks apart. I think one inspired the other. I just couldn't tell you
right.
which one transpired first. But I somewhat agree with that, and the reason being is because like state property, the state granted us. We didn't really grant rights; we were given rights. We wrote the Bill of Rights. We have the Constitution.
Yeah.
They just wanted to put it out there to say that, hey, listen, we're not going to let you step on this, and we're going to do any means possible, and we'll come here to your house if you're going to come to our house. I think that was their message.
What do you think of, your kid constitution? You've studied it. You understand what it means and what it says. I know this doesn't exactly fall into it, but due process is something that's important, right?
Yeah.
Now, obviously that's a court of law, so this is different than what we're trying to get into and talk about here.
Yeah.
But we're now seeing this public willingness to just throw out due process even in society. Take the courthouse out of the equation, but just in society itself. I think it just broke again. And we're seeing cancel culture kind of run rampant over our society right now. What are your thoughts about what's going on? Every little accusation turns into everyone saying, nope, this person can't have a living anymore. This person needs to go away. Everything they've ever worked for, gone.
I think that comes into a big circle where it comes to like red flag gun laws and then like confiscations, what the cancel culture. When you allow those laws to pass, you open a door for a whole other, like, I don't really know how to put it, like bad news for that person, whoever you're going to cancel out. Because now you have that person saying something, maybe not agreeing with somebody political online in their town page, or like maybe a kid's soccer team.
Yeah.
They're having like local club team, whatever. Say you were getting a disagreement with another parent. Once you allow the whole due process later, like the whole take guns due process later, that nice quote that our president said, that's when you allow them to, just because of what you said, allows them to call the police and get your family hurt.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a delivery service, like a pizza delivery service for instant, like
suffering and pain.
Instant suffering, pain, public humiliation. Like now, if you live in a neighborhood where there's a bunch of houses really close to each other, and you're getting pulled out of your house, cuffs face down, your guns are getting hauled out of your house. Even if you don't have guns, someone says, "Oh, he's going to do this or he's going to do that." Red flag gun laws. You and your whole family now look like criminals.
Yeah.
You and your whole family are treated like criminals. And for no in particular reason other than you said something, did something.
Well, think of it logically. Once the police show up at someone's house in your neighborhood, your instant thought is what they do wrong.
Yeah, I'm like, oh my God, what's going on?
That's your instant thought. Now, it's not appropriate to have that thought, really, but it's natural. It's reality. That's
sometimes when I'm on a private road, sometimes like, why are they here?
Yeah,
did they get a call or they're just snooping around? Like,
because I live on a private road.
Yeah.
And, there's been cops in the neighborhood before. One time a cop followed me to my house, parked in my driveway, and I was in my garage. And he followed me there. But he was super nice. He was like, hey, I just wanted to let you know, I don't think you realized the sticker on your license plate expired. That's all. That's all it was. And I was like, oh, thank you so much. I didn't realize. I apologize. I'll go take care of it tomorrow. And that's all it was.
That's
but
what
the
happened
neighbor
to
could have
me.
looked at him like, oh, what's going on over there?
I was driving an antique car, one of my dad's like very old BMWs, and I got home after the gym, and the police officer followed me halfway down my road, and he's like, hey, I wanted to stop you before you obviously got to where you're going because it's a private road. I don't really have, like, once you drive around here, I don't really have jurisdiction. So I'm going to get you before you go home.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, it just didn't make sense to me that this car had antique plates on it because it had relatively newer paint on it. It looked like a newer car. And I was like, oh no, gave him a registration. And then my inspection was expired. And he told me, he was like, hey, listen, your inspection's expired. That's like the one reason I started following you, and I thought it wasn't matched up. It was very odd that he said that he thought it didn't match up, the license plate.
He saw a young kid driving a nice car.
It wasn't really that nice.
Me.
It was just, it's a really old, like very base, but it's like newer, like we restored it somewhat.
Yeah.
So it looks like a newer, like,
it's just one of those like
it just looks like
80s.
a newer little Honda Civic. That's basically what it looks like.
Okay, gotcha.
It's just like this tiny little boxy car with big windows, nothing fancy about it. There's no big badges or anything. It's just fun to drive, and it's just a classic. Like I get in that car and I feel like I need to put on like Steven Tyler or something and just like grow out like a mullet and drive.
Don't do that.
No, I'm not going to do that. But and that's also a thing when it comes to like cancel culture. Some people are going so far where it's to like a bumper sticker on your car, and like say you're driving, and now they're gonna call the police on you and be like, oh my god, like this Trump supporter tried to ram me off the road, like banished a firearm at me. And then like once you do that too, like, and this is why I don't really support where police officers can just pull you out of the car for any reason. They get a report of a firearm being shown. Now whether that did or didn't happen, they're still gonna pull you over, and 9 times out of 10 pull you out of your car at gunpoint, search your vehicle.
Because they feel like one person said it, so it's justification.
Well, it just gives them, I don't know, I don't want to be mean, like I don't support police officers, but in that instance, I feel like, yeah, it could be a threat, but at this point, like it could also just be a giant freaking waste of time. Like, do you not have anything better to do?
Yeah, no, and then it absolutely happens.
It goes both ways. And I'm like, well, she said that she pointed a firearm, and if she did point a firearm, well, I mean, definitely, like, that's banishing a firearm. That's considered assault. Like, go right ahead, go after him. But at the same time, like, what happens if it's just some lady being like, this Trump supporter just decided to show a gun?
Well, the other thing that kind of disturbs me sometimes, and we saw this actually a few years ago before even cancel culture became a known term in our society. When gay marriage was legalized, and you had these companies that were like a bakery or whatever. No, I'm not going to bake your wedding cake because I don't believe that.
Yeah.
And I looked at it and goes, one, that's stupid for your business. That's just bad business.
Yeah.
You're an idiot. Okay, you have your personal beliefs, but make some money, get over it.
Yeah.
That's just my personal feelings about that. But
Bake
I also
the cake and shut up. Like,
I also thought it was stupid of people to be like, nope, this guy shouldn't have a bakery anymore. This guy, it's like, no, it was his personal belief. It was a stupid decision on his part not to do that, but he's allowed to have that belief, whether we agree with it or not.
Well, that's the thing where it comes to like my libertarian beliefs. He could or could not bake that cake. In my eyes, this is what it is.
Yeah.
Those people have the right to go and ruin his business publicly with their truth.
Sure.
Not anything else. If they decide to lie about them, then you're a hunk of shit, and good, then bake your cake, whatever.
Okay, fair enough.
But if you're going to go and tell the truth and get him hurt because of what he did or didn't do, you have the right to review his business.
Sure.
And if that's how it truly happened, and that's how people react to it, like, I wouldn't shop there again.
Yeah, I would never shop there again.
Like, no. But do I think that like he should get the business trip from him? And then no. But I think they should also have the right to tell their story. And if that happens, well, shit happened. You decided not to bake a cake.
Yeah, but I don't think there should be this public outcry that he should lose his livelihood. I just think
I don't think
you should go, all right, that's not where I want to go anymore.
Yeah, or like, hey, I'm going to write a Yelp review and be like, hey, listen, this guy decided not to write this cake for this reason. And it's the truth. And as long as that's the truth, I mean, like, they have the right to go out and be like,
how many times have we seen those fun threads on like Reddit where it's like, this person leaves this horrible Yelp review, and then the owner of the business is like, no, that's not how this happened. You came in, you were immediately abrasive, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, well, okay, now I'm getting two sides. I have no idea what to believe.
That happened to my friend.
Really?
Yeah, it happened to my friend.
How so?
A store, so he used to work for some family members, and he left working for that family business, decided to go in the same line of work right down the road from them because the family was being shitty to him, and they're just kind of shitty. So then he's starting up this nice store, and he knows I think it was his uncle. His uncle's stores, there's some fake products. They've been raided by the ATF for tobacco reasons and stuff like this. So of course, his uncle, whoever, decides to send someone in to write a review about him, and he decides to go back. Like, oh, thanks. You definitely got paid by my uncle because X, Y, and Z. This didn't happen. I was the whole there. He goes, do you mean the guy who paid you who got raided by the ATF and he just opened up like all he knew on the Yelp review? And I was just like, I read it and I just couldn't stop laughing. I was like, this is awesome, because I know this didn't happen.
Yeah.
And then he just immediately fired back, and then I think they deleted their review.
But that goes back to the earlier case of you can't really just trust everyone's word on it.
Yep.
And your point, your libertarian value is, hey, if it's honest, that's fine.
Yeah, I don't
care. But the problem is, how are we ever really going to know?
Yeah, we're not. We're
saying?
really not. It's all the time. It's going to be
he said, she said.
He said, she said. And watch cancel culture. You're come back. You're a sexist.
Yeah.
Then that's where it also comes down to, like, you have to watch what you say and just, like, even on the podcast, like, just casually talking, you have to watch what you say. I noticed it started at school with, like, my libertarian beliefs, and it started at a very young age. I think, like, middle school is when I was like, no, like, that's stupid. Like,
yeah,
I started preaching, like, equality for everyone, and it wasn't necessarily because I knew anything about libertarianism or any politics. I just always thought the way that everything should be fair no matter what.
Yeah.
Like, everyone should have equal opportunity, but not equal outcome. And I look at that as fair no matter what. Like,
yeah, equal outcome doesn't exist, shouldn't exist, because, that's to say the lazy person got the same outcome as the person who really tried very hard. Equal opportunity is absolutely a value of America, and that's what we should have. I look at the Libertarian Party and it's like, hey, if I ever were to give it a facelift, I'd just call it the Common Sense Party.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Make it easier for people and kind of be more aggressive with that. No, this is just common sense. This is how we should do this.
I don't know how people, like when I talk to Republicans or have, like, discussions with them online, they're like, oh, you're a liberal.
Oh, and liberals are going to say you're a Republican.
Exactly. And I'm like, oh ridiculous. My God. I'm like, okay, let me just they're like, what are you then? I'm like, I'm far from a liberal. Like, why don't you just look at my Facebook thread where I just bash Nancy Pelosi and just like Hillary Clinton and or Alexandria Cortez.
Cortez.
Yeah, that's so dumb.
But here's the other thing:
stupid.
You can be liberal and think those people are dumb. Bad too, or dumb, or whatever.
I had the discussion with my grandmother. She said that those two and the young congresswoman, I forget the other one who's from
Ilhan Omar.
Yeah, she said those two in particular scare her because she talks about something that they were so against in the 60s and 70s growing up. It was this huge anti-communism movement.
Yeah,
like.
We had the Red Scare in America.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah,
and I think that's coming back now. Like, we're seeing Antifa coming back as, like, the Red Scare, where everyone's calling for communism and equality, which really isn't equality. It's like,
communism's not about equality.
No, communism is about
control.
It's about control, and it's about getting the workers class to think that they have the control when they really don't. It's an illusion.
Yeah,
it's an illusion to give the government more power.
Yeah.
It's essentially, we'll grant you your equality. All you have to do is give us all of your freedoms.
It's ridiculous. I mean, even if you take it down and be like, well, communism isn't really Marxism. Marxism is more ideal. And I was like, no, it's bullshit too.
Marx created communism. He wrote.
No, I know, but there are some fundamental differences between the.
Yeah, I think they modified communism a little bit, but it was always based off of Marxism.
Yeah, but regardless, it's all nonsense. I mean, what effort you put in is what you take out.
Yes.
It's like what John Lennon said, and I'm talking the Beatles, John Lennon, not Lenin, Russia Lenin. The love you make is equal to the love you take.
Yeah.
Right? So what you put out is what you get back. If you're a lazy shit, don't expect much back.
No, don't expect. If you're going to be laying in bed every single day, not creating your own business, not creating new ideas, not benefiting or giving, not even working for yourself.
Yeah.
Like, even if you can be self-employed, like, congratulations, but, like, you need to, like, improve your business, maintain your business, make sure it's running correctly, because if you're not doing it, this thing's going to fail.
Yeah.
If you're not maintaining, it's going to degrade. And if you're not improving, you're just maintaining.
Yeah.
And at that point, I mean, you either have two choices. You maintain your business until it fails, or you improve your business as it grows. And then if you're the way I look at business, if you're not increasing, you're decreasing.
Yeah.
Even if you're just staying at the same, even if no matter what your profit margins and everything's the same, you're still, in my eyes, decreasing because you're not growing.
Yeah.
Those customers are going to move. Those customers, they're not always going to stay. And if you're not gaining any more customers or gaining a new clientele, you're just going to end up losing them slowly.
Yeah. I mean, and when you enter the workforce, you have to start somewhere. Typically, most of us, when we enter the workforce, we're typically teenagers and we're working for around minimum wage, whatever it is. It's much higher now than it was when I was a teenager. but that's where you start and you progress. You continue to move up.
Oh, minimum wage. I hate minimum
What
wage.
is it right now?
It's like, I think in New Hampshire it's $7.25 or $7.50.
Really? Because in like Massachusetts, I think it's like $12, $13.
Yeah, we're way lower. Since we don't really have as many taxes on like labor and income and things like that. So
Yeah.
like Massachusetts, some people who are maybe watching and maybe saying, well, minimum wage is a good thing. Let us explain, if you agree with this, why it's not. When you put a minimum wage on the price of goods, it has to match its supply and demand. You can't just put a minimum wage on on everything. Like you can't put a minimum wage on welders, you can't put a minimum wage on cashiers. And that's because each industry has its own different product, like supply and demand. So if there's not much demand, but there's a good amount of supply, why would you pay somebody $15 an hour where that's not like you're going to be raising the price of the goods, not because of the demand, but just because of you have to, the cost of work is going to go up.
Yeah.
When you get rid of like all economic restrictions, especially minimum wage, that's when you see the price of the good completely drop. That's when you see the cost of living drop. That's when you see like property maintenance and stuff like that. They all kind of work at a minimum wage. I doubt any of them are working at a minimum wage around here, but say that they're at minimum wage. Once you drop the minimum wage, the cost of living at the apartment goes down.
Yeah.
The cost of almost anything that person has to do now goes down.
Well, it's output value.
Yeah.
What's the output of your work, and what's that worth to the company?
I did a pretty shitty job at explaining that.
No. You actually you did a fairly good job.
I just feel like, yeah, it's the output and input. If that company's not making a lot of money, but they have to pay their employees, say every single one $15 an hour, they're going to end up losing more money than making more money, and entail they're going to have to raise the price of each good. It's the same thing with the tariffs.
Yeah.
You're putting a mandatory pay on your employees. If there was a mandatory pay, I guess, minimum wage per industry, I might sort of kind of agree with that. I still wouldn't fully agree with that, but I would agree with it better than if it's as a whole, everyone has to get paid the same.
Yeah, that doesn't work, because why would I work hard? Why wouldn't I just be a cashier at a grocery store?
Exactly.
And say, hey, I can make $50,000 a year being a cashier at a grocery store and working 40 hours a week. Fine, let me do that. Instead of saying, hey, maybe I'm going to start my business, a plumbing business, and yeah, I'm going to make $25,000 the first year, but I'm working towards something, and I'm going to keep progressing and building that up.
Well, now you have everyone who wants to work for a corporation. Like, okay, if I work for this corporation, I'm still going to get my $15 an hour.
Yeah.
And I don't have to go and I don't have to start my own company. I don't have to go work for the guy down the road who might be wanting me to do extra work. Oh, I don't have all these, assistance packages who I know he could go out of business any day, or he could just fire me or change. They're all going to like Walmart, McDonald's, or like these big corporations, or like some people are doing DoorDash and stuff now, which is kind of cool. And there's not a minimum wage on that. That's what you do, how much you do a day is how much you make. And I think that's a perfect form of capitalism, is like Instacart and DoorDash.
Yeah. Or even Uber and Lyft to a certain extent. A little bit different, but
to a certain extent. How much, like you get a percentage off of each order, and then you get your tip.
Yeah.
There is no minimum wage.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. It's kind of like serving. Like, you get a tip per each order, how much each order. If you do a $100 order, some people are going to get a $20 tip. If you do a $50 order, some people are going to get a $10 tip.
Yeah, it's weird. And anytime you go over to Europe, you're like, wait a second, what? I don't tip the waitress? And they're like, no, I get paid. I don't get paid $1.69 an hour. I get paid an actual wage. So no, you don't tip us. That's how different cultures deal with it differently. So it's interesting when you try and go and see someone else's model of how it works and see how it's successful, and then look at our model and go, oh, what's the flaw in this?
Yeah, like I don't agree essentially with like changing our whole model like back to like metric too. You see everyone else's metric, and we're being the like one stubborn entity that's
and I don't want to go back there because I don't want to have to learn something new.
No, exactly. You don't want to
old.
I guess they did it with like liquids and waters and stuff with like milliliters and like liters and stuff like that. But like, how are we going to measure speed? Every single one of our cars to this day, none of us have been really taught kilometers an hour, unless you're a car guy and you're watching car videos of some like foreigner go like 360 kilometers an hour, and you just do the math.
Well, think about it like this: how many people actually know how many feet are in a mile?
Not many.
No, I think it's 5,280.
Yeah, because a quarter mile is 1320.
Yeah, so I think it's 5,280 is how long a mile is.
Yeah,
I don't know how long a kilometer is to feet. Like, I can't do that off the top of my head. That's that's a whole kind of other nonsense in itself.
Yeah.
And I don't want to do it, but at the same time, shit, it would make things a lot easier globally.
Yeah, and it would, and that's where I think like the wage working and stuff like that kind of ties in. Also, if we were to find one system where there isn't really, like it was per industry, like you said over there, the waiters get paid a wage, they don't get paid
Based off tips, yeah.
based off tips. If the whole industry was to, like I know there are some restaurants that do that, very little restaurants that do that, but some restaurants that actually give their waiters a wage because they want to keep the tips.
Yeah.
So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and I think freedom should prevail in that aspect where restaurants should have their choice to do it. But I think that if we saw it more out here, it'll make a lot more people happier.
But then we also come into, there's people out there that it will exploit that and will exploit the workforce.
Exactly, because then they're going to
part of the problem.
Snap the tips. But at the same time, that's, in my eyes, the only function of the government was to ensure that our rights were protected. They weren't ensured to give us or grant rights or change rights or restrict rights. They were to make sure that our rights were granted and protected. And I think that's where, when you see a worker's rights being violated, that's when you should call like the Labor Commission.
Yeah, but see, here's the problem. And we can take exactly what happened last century in this country as an example of how there's the flaw in the system, which is workers' rights were forever being trampled on in all of these factories across the country.
Yeah.
And so unions start to develop. They gain more power to control what's going on in their own workforce. And then what happened? They got corrupted.
Exactly.
They took too much power, and then they screwed up their own industry and their livelihood of how they get paid, and decreased their own value because they became too powerful. And look at teachers' union. Not great.
No.
It's impossible to get rid of a bad teacher.
Yeah.
And what's the first line of people you should be looking at to get rid of? Bad teachers.
And I think that also goes to sometimes like police unions.
Same thing with police. It's hard to get rid of a bad cop. And then not only that bad cop can quit and then go work for some other police station.
Yeah, he can just, I'll resign.
Yeah.
It doesn't put anything bad on him.
Nope. And then he can go 4 towns away and work for another department.
Yep.
That's it's humans. We're corruptible.
No one's perfect, yeah.
No, but
and we're all greedy to an extent.
Of course, we all want ours.
It just depends on how much greed.
Yeah, I mean, it's any animal. They want squirrels want all the nuts in the forest, right?
Yeah.
And that's part of the predicament we're living in right now.
Yeah, it is, and it's getting too much corrupt, too corrupt, and people are making it too easy.
Yeah,
there's not like Congress. It's too easy.
Oh yeah,
it's way too easy to become corrupt.
Oh yeah, ideally we're supposed to have checks and balances.
Where are those?
I have no
right
idea.
Right now, I'm just seeing checks. I'm not seeing any balances.
Yeah, there are no
balances.
Just
checks. It's just Congress and the president checking each other, and then the judiciary hopping in, and then everyone just not getting what they want. It just sucks. That's how the form of government's going now. There's no balance. There's just checks.
Yeah, it's very frustrating.
Yep.
It's very frustrating to watch. I'm going to ask you one last thing.
Yeah, and then next week we'll probably hop onto that, the whole checks and balances thing, and what's going on with Trump, and how we think that there's some Republicans turning against him.
Yeah, so let me ask you this one last thing. We see the report of nearly 18,000, I think it was nearly 18,000 troops being removed from Germany.
Yeah.
How does that sit with you? Is that something you look at and go, okay, good, they're coming home? Or are you frustrated that's like, hey, if you look at history, we kind of need a presence there?
Yes and no. I think it's a good thing that troops are coming home, because now we don't have to spend as much money. We can take a small burden off the taxpayers or redirect.
We do have to spend a lot to remove them, but
yeah.
that continuing cost decreases.
Over time, we don't have to maintain the bases. We don't have to rent out the bases. We don't have to fly people back and forth all the time. Mm. We stay here. I also see an issue, though, where there's the huge Russian advance. A lot of people are saying there's an advancement where they want to put their influence throughout the whole Europe. They're trying to take back Europe slowly. We saw that with Ukraine in 2015.
It's so annoying because they did it before and
they're
sucked.
And they're doing it again.
It sucked for them even.
It did, and they're doing it again, and that's where I see a slight problem. I'm like, all right, this isn't really in quote national defense, but it could spill over to like another huge like Cold War type thing. Because then if there's another Soviet Union, if they do form another Soviet Union, what are we gonna do?
Yeah, we got a problem on our hands.
Because then we have them and China.
Yeah, I'm really not worried about Russia. They don't have the infrastructure to do real damage.
No. They do and they don't. I mean, like They do have enough infrastructure if they have a big team behind them. If they take China and China puts themselves
Well,
together, then China and Russia together.
If they team up, that's a serious problem.
Yeah.
But if you looked at them, if you isolated each of them, you go, reality is there's not much really either of them could do on their own.
On their own,
China's
not
got a lot
much.
of boots on the ground, but you got to get them here, and we've got a lot of preventative measures.
We have a huge preventive measure.
I mean, we have more aircraft carriers than the rest of the world combined.
Yeah.
Right? So we have a lot of ways of preventing that from happening. Yeah, you can have all those boots on the ground, but you got to get those boots here for it to make a difference, right?
Yeah, and we have the best national defense ever.
Yeah.
Like, so we don't even know really our own national defense protocol because it's so top secret. Like, we were selling now the Patriot system to Saudi Arabia and Israel openly. Imagine what we have that's not publicly known.
Yeah.
Just insane things that could just stop advancement.
Think how good Israel is at defense. Granted, they've got a much smaller area to deal with,
They're
but they're surrounded by enemies.
They're like the size of New Jersey, and they fend off thousands and thousands and thousands of attacks
yeah,
a year.
I think if push came to shove, they could
Take over the whole region. They literally,
They probably could.
if we were like, hey, go right ahead, they would, and they think they like partially want to, but I don't.
It's a bad idea.
That's a bad idea. It's a really bad idea.
I mean, continuing to push and change the lines on the maps that we talked about earlier, which we kind of wish those lines were gone to a certain extent.
It's such an ethnically sensitive region
Oh yeah,
too. If you just let Israel, end quote, not mean to be like in a negative way, but the Jews take over,
yeah.
that whole region will just blow up. There'll be migrants from everywhere. It will be like another crusade. Everyone will just be like, oh my God, like all the different ethnic groups and the different religions are just going to come back to that one area if we let Israel take over again. And they're going to fight.
Yeah,
They're
well,
going to fight for it.
It's going to be constant warfare. I mean, we've talked about there's always wars going on. Well, I mean,
Was it like religion, food, religion, water, and land are like the three biggest war starters. What's over in Israel?
Now you can throw
religion, water,
oil
and
in
land.
there.
Oh yeah, oil. Thanks, U.S.
We're not the only ones. I mean, look
Russia.
At Russia.
Yeah, Russia's been trying to do that, but I think we're more open about it. Slightly more open about it. Russia was just like, oh, we're here for reasons.
No, we want the Crimea for other reasons.
Yeah.
No, you want access.
Yeah.
That's what you're looking for.
Mhm.
Why do you think they're messing around with Syria? They want access.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it is.
Yep.
And that's how this game is played. It's like a global game of Risk, and it sucks for the rest of us.
Yeah, because then everyone else, well, they don't give a fuck. They don't care. They're
No.
going to go in there and just do what they always do. Destroy a nation, take what they want, and then leave. And
Yeah.
then they're going to create an enemy, but they're so big it doesn't matter. Then they're going to be fighting terrorism for the rest of their nation's life.
Yeah.
Even afterwards, those sub-nations are going to be fighting terrorism just because of what Russia did.
Let me ask you a quick question before I leave the set. If there was another country out there, if you had to move from America, you had to leave the country for whatever reason, where would you go? I'm most curious how people respond to this.
I don't think I have one country. I think I have, like, right now 3 options.
All right. Hit me with it.
Switzerland,
All right. Understandable.
Finland.
Okay. Colder, but still understandable.
Yeah. And then probably, like, Israel.
All right. You know you're going to have to serve.
Yeah.
All right. I always look and go, okay, Australia, that's a really nice.
I always look at the places where it's, like, less intrusive. For, like, Switzerland's not as intrusive.
Yeah.
If, like, you have gun rights, you have, well, the Czech Republic's on that list too because they now have gun rights.
Mm-hmm.
They have rights.
Yeah.
Any country that really entails rights, I'd probably be in. If there's not a big amount of rights, I don't want to be there. Like,
Fair
if they
enough.
can just come into my home and stuff like that and take my shit, whatever. I mean,
Well,
in the
gun
IDF,
rights are very restricted in Australia because of the shooting they had in, I think it's like 1995, where they had a mass shooting, and then they really changed everything. And you know what you haven't seen there? A mass shooting since.
there was one, I think, like 2 years ago.
No, you haven't seen a big. Okay, well, we're having them fairly often until this all happened. We had them seemingly 2 or 3 a year that you'd get casualties of upwards of 5+ people. And okay, maybe they've had one in 25 years.
Well, that's also, you have to look at, like, okay, the number of mass shootings compared to number of firearms deaths per capita.
Sure.
I always look at the firearms deaths per capita because the mass shooting, okay, there's just a group of crazy people going out deciding to try to shoot everyone. It doesn't necessarily mean that their culture is violent, that there's a gun problem. It necessarily means there's a mental health problem.
Yeah,
That's
that's
what
a
I
whole
see.
other can of worms.
Yeah,
but
that's what I see with mass shootings. I see it more of a health problem with mass shootings, mental health.
Yeah.
When I see gun violence statistics go up, I see more of a cultural issue, and I see more of a like that's where the violence, like the whole issue of it comes up with like the culture behind it,
Yep.
what they're doing, why they're doing it, and the violence. And that's where I see kind of like the access to firearms, at least how like the street access to firearms isn't really the problem, but it contributes to that type of culture. In my eyes, I think you can go to a vending. You should be able to go to a vending machine and buy whatever the fuck you want for a gun.
Really?
Yeah, like if there's a vending machine right outside and you want to buy it, go right ahead. If you want to just put your license in there, and then they scan your license, comes out. I mean, then some libertarians would say that's too far, but like for me, that's all I care about. As long as they know that you're not like a habitual offender,
Yeah.
who cares?
And can you add training into that? They should get trained.
I don't
that's
think
important.
it should be, as a libertarian, I don't think it should be
required.
Okay. But I think it should be strongly
Encouraged.
Yeah, like
Fair enough.
Like I didn't really have too much formal training until I turned about 15.
Mm-hmm.
But before then, like I was shooting at 6 years old.
Yeah.
I killed my first turkey at 8 and went hunting every youth season until I was 13. And then I skipped the season, got hurt, and then I went up until I was 15.
Mm-hmm.
But still, like I didn't really have any formal training, but I was responsible. I knew what to do. I had people who had formal training teaching me. And that doesn't necessarily mean that I was bad at firearms before I got my formal training, that it was unsafe.
Mm-hmm.
I still felt pretty confident that I could do, and I was safe with them. It just, I don't think anyone should be required to do anything.
Fair enough.
And I think if that means that like we should have rights of the right to bear arms, like the militias, like back in the day, I think it entails like you didn't see the militias getting any formal training at first. They formed together and they just started shooting, and they just kind of did their own training. And then
we called that formal training.
Yeah, we called that formal training.
Let me ask you, based on what you just said, what about a car?
Same thing.
You think it should be the same thing?
I think that if you're going on the street and you're going to be crashing into people, it's the same thing if you're going to be going to the range and you're going to be shooting people. You're going to be stopped and you're going to be punished for it. And if you don't really know how to drive a car, like maybe, yeah, you should have to take a test to see if you should qualify to go on the road. But at that point, I don't think they should have to pay for it. It should be state provided. Interesting.
If they're going to mandate it, they should also provide
sort of
the training for it.
That's where it comes. Like there was an amendment, I forget the number of the amendment, but the amendment basically was that the state can't take rights and then license them back and make people buy them back. They can't license out rights. They can grant them, or if they restrict them, that there's no cost to it. And that's where I think that there's cost.
Interesting.
Where you've taken the right to travel or that right to form of travel, and now you've created a cost behind it because of the state. Which I don't know. It's hard because the society that we formed today, I think that we've kind of ignored back then.
Certainly.
Yeah, I think that we wouldn't
but
have.
Is that more a product of the fact that we talk about the Constitution, Bill of Rights, whatever, being a living, breathing document, and yes, we added amendments to it, but we've never
taken them and added new ones.
Certainly, we've done that, but we've never had a real consistent constitutional conventions where we look at everything and try and adjust based on how the world has changed, because the world has drastically changed from what we saw in 1776. In the 1780s, when that's all being written, I think it's very different.
I think it's more of a social problem, and I think the government has made it a false illusion that they have to be involved with how the world's currently going.
Interesting. Okay.
I think that again, the federal government was only there to ensure that the states' governments aren't violating our rights.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as the rights stay the same and the times change, they're broad. They're so broad that they can go with the times. Firearms today are, sure, they're a little different than firearms now, but they're the same concept, the same thing. They're there for the same reason.
Yeah.
They're there to protect us against tyrannical government. They're not there for fun, or just to go shooting. And I think in this culture, if firearms are just there for fun or to go shooting, they would have no place.
Yeah.
Because right now, we're so condensed. Everyone's so on top of each other. There is almost no safe place around here unless you're in a valley or shooting into a hill.
Yeah.
That's about it. You can't just go shooting on the flatlands or in the woods like you used to be able to back when our parents were growing up. There's so many people around here.
Where I live now it's a relatively new community that was built, but it used to be the old sand pits where the local police would go and shoot. That's where they would shoot, is the sand pits, because it was a safe enough place. It was surrounded by elevated land, and they could shoot in there without, causing any problems whatsoever. But you're right; those pieces of lands are now being developed into communities and housing complexes and all that stuff. So it's going away.
And that's where I look at. Like, I look at rights, and I'm like, oh, rights are great. And I look at rights, I'm like, rights suck. I'm like, God damn it. Like, the property rights, like, when it comes to this guy just taking and buying this place and rezoning it for development. And then, like, that also has to do with corruption, too, because some guy might come in and be like, hey, it cost me $20,000 to rezone something. Here's $40,000. Rezone it.
I know what you're saying.
Yeah, that's like how it works. And some people are like, okay. And now it's rezoned for, like, a development, and now next thing you know, where the little kids used to ride their dirt bikes and four-wheelers and go hunting with dad, and it's now old people homes.
Hey, I don't live in an old person home.
No, I'm just saying, like, right down the road from me, there's like a decent area where like you could go and like have lake access if you walk down there through kayak. I never went down there because I lived on the lake, but like we had friends that would go down there. Now it's old people home, right next to the farmland, like literally right next to the farmland. It's like big 4-acre field, and then on the other side there's another farmland and the farmhouse and the barn and the animals, and then there's just old people home like right next to it. Just so out of place. It's just like, oh my God, like get rid of it. I hate that type of stuff too. And like what really upsets me is like, oh, that would be a great place to go and like hiking. Then you take your dog in there, and the next week there's marking the trees to be cut down. You're like, what the hell? And then that's also where it comes to like the animal. I don't want to be like, oh, animals have rights too, because I'm not like part of PETA, but like,
you don't have to be a part of PETA to care about.
Exactly. That's where I'm like,
first of all, PETA sucks.
PETA does suck. People eating tasty animals. Okay,
I love that.
That's like my favorite. You can go up to the place in Manchester and buy those shirts, but like you have to look at the ecosystem impact on it too. Like, okay, what happens if there's like a mother in there, like one of the turtles? Like if you see a turtle with the eggs in New Hampshire, I remember there was the old veteran cemetery in Wyndham where they had a turtle literally dig a hole, lay its nest. Fish and Game came and put big tape around it and let no one go near it. Do they study that type of stuff, or do the construction workers care about that type of stuff when they go in and bury it and they just take shit down? Like now in town, we're seeing lost animals. Like now deers are coming into our backyard on the lake.
I have them all the time.
And I'm like, why are these deer in my backyard? Like ever since I was a kid, I've seen like foxes and bunnies and squirrels and rabbits. I've never seen a deer come anywhere near my dogs.
Well, they don't have the same...
They don't have the choice.
Range that they used to have. And that's part of this. I mean, I see them all the time because they would come into that area because that's where they knew no one lived. Yeah. Certainly the police would sometimes be there shooting, not at them. Maybe they did, I don't know. But, it was still a free area for them to move about. It's funny that you bring that up because I'm dealing with an issue at my place where we abut conservation land kind of all around our community. And the conservation department wants to put in a lake behind us. I'm like, you're inherently against your own strategy, your conservation, so you want to change the ecosystem instead of the ecosystem that already existed. If you put in a small lake or pond, it's a different ecosystem now. So you're not conserving what you had before.
No.
It's like, you want something pretty.
Yeah, you want the nice something to run around and look at, and the birds and the ducks come in.
But you're forgetting that other animals make that their home now.
Yep. And we'll definitely have to get on to that next week.
Yeah, this is a whole convoluted mess now.
It's long. It's a long podcast. That's good. Time's good. Next week, guys, hopefully Riley should be back on. We're trying to get into a more consistent schedule, especially with where our content is too, and how we're building our content, and what we're coming up for content. Today was kind of like just kind of go with it, but hey, it worked out. It was a good podcast, Ben. Thank you so much.
Break glass in case of emergency. That's what I'm here for. Oh, your co-host didn't show up? All right, I'll make something happen.
It was like, all right, bam, got a fire extinguisher.
Well, we made it happen.
Yeah, it happened, and then it was a decent podcast. It was a good long one. So hopefully, guys, next week we'll be talking about how we think Congress is turning on Trump. Obviously, now some of the things that we touched on beforehand, and hopefully Riley will be there. Have a good weekend, guys. Or week. Stay safe. And please email me in with what you guys want to talk about. We'll put in the email soon. We're going to create a Young American podcast email so you guys can contact me or Riley, and then we can hear from you guys. Thank you so much. Have a good week.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.